The shovel hit the earth with a thud that echoed like a final judgment, mud splattering across Matthew's boots as the laughter from the hardware store porch sliced through the late afternoon air. "Look at the fairy digging his little flowers again," sneered Jake Harlan, the town's self-appointed king of straight-laced mediocrity, his voice carrying just loud enough to ensure Matthew heard every syllable. In that moment, as Matthew's grip tightened on the handle until his knuckles whitened, he wondered if the soil beneath him could swallow him whole, or if it would finally yield the roots of something unbreakable. Willow Creek, Oregon, clung to the edge of the Cascade foothills like a forgotten postcard, where rain-slicked pines whispered secrets to the wind and the locals nursed grudges older than the redwoods. It was the kind of small town where everyone knew your business before you did, and Matthews had been the punchline to their favorite joke for 8 years now. He had arrived fresh out of Portland, 20 after a messy breakup that left him with nothing but a beat-up truck and a green thumb inherited from a grandmother he barely remembered. The job at Harlan Hardware was supposed to be temporary, a way to scrape by while he figured out what came next. But temporary stretched into seasons, and soon the aisles of nails and paint cans became his reluctant home. Matthew Hale was not the type to flaunt anything, least of all his heart. At 28, he carried himself with the quiet grace of someone who had learned early that vulnerability was a luxury he couldn't afford. His days blurred into a rhythm of stocking shelves by dawn, tending the community garden by noon, and retreating to his cramped apartment above the town's only laundromat by dusk. The garden was his sanctuary, a half-acre plot behind the old library where wildflowers tangled with heirloom tomatoes, and where he could lose himself in the dirt without eyes on him. Or so he thought. That afternoon, as the rain held its breath and the sky hung heavy with the promise of storm, Matthew knelt in the garden, his fingers tracing the delicate veins of a dahlia petal. The flower was a stubborn thing, blooming defiant pink against the grey world around it. He smiled faintly, brushing soil from his hands, when the truck engine rumbled to life down the street. Jake's voice boomed again, this time joined by a chorus from his crew of buddies, all high school has-beens clinging to their Letterman jackets like badges of honor. "Hey, Hale! You planting a rainbow flag next? Need some glitter for those pansies?" The laughter erupted, sharp as shattered glass, and Matthew felt the familiar heat crawl up his neck. He didn't look up. He never did. Responding was like feeding a fire, it only grew. Instead, he pressed the shovel deeper, imagining the earth parting for him like an old friend. By evening, the hardware store was a ghost town, shelves shadowed under fluorescent hums that buzzed like angry hornets. Matthew wiped down the counter, the scent of pine cleaner mixing with the faint tang of regret. Mrs. Ellis, the widow who ran the flower section, shuffled in from the back, her arthritic hands clutching a stack of receipts. She was the closest thing he had to an ally in Willow Creek, her late husband having been the town's unofficial peacemaker before cancer claimed him 5 years back. "You all right, Matty?" she asked, her voice soft as worn cotton. She never used the full name, it felt too formal for the boy she'd watched grow from awkward newcomer to quiet fixture. He nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just another day in paradise, Ellen." She teascared, sliding a mug of instant coffee his way. "Those boys. Jake's got his daddy's temper and none of his sense. Don't let him burrow in." Matthew sipped the coffee, bitter on his tongue, and thought of Portland. The city lights, the anonymous crowds where he could hold hands with a stranger without the world tilting on its axis. Had left that life behind after Ryan, his college boyfriend, decided Matthew's small-town dreams were too quaint for his ambitions. Ryan had packed for New York with a kiss on the cheek and a promise to call that never came. Now, 8 years later, Willow Creek had carved its mark on him deeper than any city scar. The bell above the door jingled, pulling him from his reverie. In walked Theo Grant, the town's golden boy turned reluctant deputy, all broad shoulders and easy charm that hid a spine of steel. Theo was 30, with sun-kissed skin from weekends on the lake and dark hair cropped close, a faint scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood fall that made him look perpetually thoughtful. He was straight as the Columbia River, or so the rumors went, but had always treated Matthew with a decency that bordered on kindness, which in Willow Creek was rarer than a dry July. "Evening, folks," Theo said, tipping his hat to Ellen before his gaze settled on Matthew. There was a pause, just long enough to notice, before he added, Matthew. Saw you in the garden earlier. Those dahlias are something else. Matthew felt a flicker, unbidden and warm, at the compliment. Thanks. They're fighters. Theo leaned on the counter, his uniform shirt straining slightly at the seams. Listen, I hate to do this on a Friday, but we got a call about some vandalism out by the old mill. You hear anything? Ellen excused herself to the back, leaving them in a bubble of awkward quiet. Matthew shook his head. Nothing. But if it's Jake's crew, you'll find boot prints bigger than my ego. Theo chuckled, low and genuine, the sound easing the knot in Matthew's chest. Noted. Hey, you coming to the harvest fair tomorrow? Ellen's baking booth needs defenders from the pie thieves. It was an olive branch, casual as breathing, but Matthew saw it for what it was, an invitation to belong, even if just on the fringes. Maybe. If the rain holds off. As Theo left, the door swinging shut behind him, Matthew allowed himself a moment to watch the taillights fade. Theo was the kind of man who made you believe in second chances, even if they were never meant for you. He finished closing up, the streets of Willow Creek emptying into twilight, and drove home through mist that clung like ghosts. His apartment was a single room with peeling wallpaper and a window overlooking the alley, where cats yowled territorial disputes under the street lamp. He kicked off his boots, collapsed onto the sagging couch, and pulled out his phone. No messages, as usual. Scrolling through social media, he landed on a photo from Portland, Ryan, grinning with a new partner at some rooftop bar, the city skyline glittering like fool's gold. Matthew closed the app, the ache familiar as an old bruise. Sleep came fitful, dreams tangled with soil and scorn, until a knock shattered the dawn. He stumbled to the door, rubbing sleep from his eyes, to find a man in a crisp suit standing there, briefcase in hand and a look of practiced sympathy on his face. Mr. Hale? Invicta Lang from Lang & Associates in Portland. May I come in? Matthew blinked, the fog of sleep clearing just enough to register the man's polished shoes and the envelope clutched in his fist. Sure. What's this about? Victor stepped inside, the space suddenly feeling smaller. He cleared his throat, unfolding the envelope with deliberate care. I'm afraid I have news regarding your great-uncle, Elias Hawthorne. He passed last week. Heart attack, peaceful in his sleep. Elias Hawthorne. The name stirred a vague memory, a reclusive figure from family lore, the black sheep who had vanished to the coast decades ago, amassing a fortune in timber and real estate while the rest of the Hales scraped by in the Midwest. Matthew had met him once, as a child, during a summer visit to the sprawling estate in the hills above Willow Creek. The place was called Hawthorne Castle by locals, though it was more Victorian mansion than fortress, with turrets that pierced the fog and gardens that sprawled like forgotten dreams. Victor handed over the papers, his voice steady. Mr. Hawthorne left no children, no close kin. You were his only living nephew. The estate. It's yours. Everything. Matthew stared at the document, the words blurring. The castle. The fortune. A life upended in ink and legalese. He laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the walls. Me? They must have the wrong Hale. But Victor was already pulling out photos, the castle gates rusted but grand, the library stacked with leather-bound tomes, the greenhouse bursting with exotics. And there, in the will, Matthew's name in bold script. As the lawyer left with instructions for the reading in Portland next week, Matthew sank to the floor, the papers scattering like autumn leaves. Mocked gardener to heir apparent. The irony tasted like rain-soaked earth, rich and unforgiving. He thought of Jake's laughter, of Theo's quiet nod, of the garden waiting for him. What now? The town that had buried him in jest would dig him up in envy. The morning sun broke through the clouds as he drove to work, the truck rattling over potholes that mirrored the tremor in his chest. At the store, Ellen was already arranging poinsettias, her eyes lighting up as he burst through the door. You look like you saw a ghost, Matty. He set the papers on the counter, watching her face shift from concern to awe. More like inherited one. Word spread like wildfire in Willow Creek, as it always did. By noon, whispers slithered through the aisles. Hawthorne? That old pile of stones? Hale's a millionaire now. Jake and his crew slunk in around lunch, their bravado cracking at the edges. So, pretty boy, Jake drawled, tossing a bag of fertilizer onto the counter harder than necessary. Heard you hit the jackpot. Gonna buy yourself a Prince Charming to match the castle. The others snickered, but it rang false, laced with the sour tang of resentment. Matthew met Jake's eyes, steady for the first time in years. Maybe he'll just plant a moat. Keep the weeds out. Ellen stifled a gasp from the flower section, but Jake only flushed, snatching his change and storming out. Victory tasted small, fleeting, but it was something. As the day wore on, customers trickled in with veiled curiosity, the baker asking about renovations, the librarian probing for tours. Matthew deflected with polite smiles, his mind racing ahead to the castle, to the life it promised. That evening, Theo swung by the store just as Matthew locked up, his patrol car idling curbside. Heard the news. Congrats, man. That's huge. Matthew leaned against the doorframe, the cool air nipping at his skin. Feels like a dream. Or a curse. Theo stepped closer, his presence solid in the gathering dusk. Now. It's a chance. Don't let these hills swallow it. He hesitated, then clapped Matthew's shoulder, the touch lingering a beat too long. Fair tomorrow. Save me a dance. It was a joke, light as fog, but Matthew's pulse quickened. Only if you bring your boots. As Theo drove off, Matthew walked to the garden, the dahlias glowing under the street lamp. He knelt, fingers in the soil, and whispered to the earth, "What have you gotten me into?" The night answered with silence, but for the first time, it felt like possibility. The harvest fair dawned crisp, the town square transformed into a riot of booths and banners, the air thick with cinnamon and cider. Matthew wandered the edges, a ghost in his own story, the weight of the inheritance like an invisible crown. Children darted between legs, laughing as they clutched caramel apples, while couples swayed to a country band on the makeshift stage. He spotted Ellen at her booth, pies cooling on wire racks, and she waved him over with flour-dusted hands. Try this one, Matty. Apple cranberry. For your new empire. He took a slice, the tartness bursting on his tongue, and for a moment, the world felt simple. But then Jake appeared, flanked by his shadow, a beer in hand despite the early hour. Well, if it ain't Lord of the Manor. Planning to evict us peasants yet? The crowd hushed, eyes flicking their way. Matthew straightened, the pie forgotten. Not today, Jake. But I am thinking of fencing the garden. Keep out the pests. A few chuckles rippled through, tentative but real, and Jake's face twisted. He stepped closer, breath sour. You think a pile of rocks makes you better? You're still the same freak who. Theo materialized from the throng, his hand firm on Jake's arm. Easy, Harlan. There's no place for this. Jake shrugged him off, but the moment broke, the crowd dispersing like smoke. Theo turned to Matthew, concern etching lines around his eyes. You good? Yeah. Matthew exhaled, the tension coiling tight. Just adjusting. They walked together then, the fair unfolding around them in a blur of lights and laughter. Theo bought them hot chocolates, steam curling in the chill, and they found a bench overlooking the duck pond, where mallards quacked indifferently to human drama. You deserve this, you know, Theo said quietly, stirring his cup. The castle, the fresh start. Willow Creek's lucky to have you sticking around. Matthew glanced at him, the steam veiling Theo's face like a secret. Sticking around? That's the plan? Theo shrugged, a small smile playing. Maybe. Town's got its rough edges, but it's home. And homes. They grow on you. The words hung, warm and unspoken, as the band struck up a slow tune. Couples paired off, and Theo stood, offering his hand. Come on. One dance. For luck. Matthew took it, heart hammering, the world narrowing to the press of calloused palm against his. They moved awkwardly at first, Theo's boots scuffing the grass, but then it flowed, a rhythm born of shared silences. Around them, Willow Creek spun on, oblivious or uncaring, and for those 3 minutes, Matthew felt seen, not as the gardener or the heir, but as himself. The spell shattered with a phone buzz in his pocket. Victor Lang's name flashed, and Matthew stepped back, answering with a quick, "Yeah." "Matthew, the reading's tomorrow." "But there's a complication. Some distant cousins contesting the will." "They'll be there." The high crashed, reality's cold grip returning. Cousins. Betrayal in blood. As he hung up, Theo watched him, brow furrowed. "Trouble." "Family," Matthew said, the word bitter. "Always is." That night, alone in his apartment, the papers spread across the floor like a battlefield map, Matthew traced the castle's outline in the photos. Turrets against stormy skies, gardens choked with weeds but whispering of glory. He thought of Elias, the uncle who'd chosen him, a boy he'd seen only once, over blood that shared his name. Why? The question gnawed, but so did resolve. The drive to Portland the next morning was a blur of highway and hurtling thoughts, rain lashing the windshield like accusations. Victor met him at the firm's gleaming office, all glass and steel overlooking the Willamette. The conference room held a long table, and at it sat the cousins, Lydia and Marcus Thorne, mid-40s, polished in ways that screamed old money resentment. Lydia, with her sharp bob and sharper eyes, drummed manicured nails, Marcus, balding and broad, slouched with feigned boredom. "Matthew," Lydia purred, as if they were long-lost friends. "Such a surprise. Uncle Elias always was eccentric." Victor cleared his throat, launching into legalese that blurred into white noise. The will was ironclad, Elias specifying Matthew by name, citing the kin who understands the soil of legacy in a handwritten note that made Matthew's throat tighten. But the Thorns had lawyers too, slick suits arguing undue influence, questions of Matthew's lifestyle suitability that hung unspoken but venomous. Objection after objection, the room grew stifling, until Victor slid the note across, to the boy who tends what others discard. "The castle is yours, Matthew. Grow it strong." Lydia snatched it, her laugh brittle. Sentimental drivel. Elias was senile. Marcus leaned in, voice low. "We grew up summers there, boy." "You? You're the gardener they laugh at. What makes you think you can handle Hawthorne?" Matthew met his gaze, the weight of Willow Creek's mockery fueling him. "I've handled worse than stone and secrets. Try me." The judge, a no-nonsense woman with silver streaks, ruled in Matthew's favor that afternoon, the Thorn storming out with threats of appeal ringing hollow. Victor clapped his back as they left. "You've got spine, hail." The estate's waiting. Back in Willow Creek by dusk, the castle loomed in his mind's eye, a beacon or a burden. He detoured to the garden, the dahlias drooping under fresh rain, and knelt to stake one that had fallen. As petals brushed his cheek, soft as forgiveness, he whispered, "We're in this together." Word of the wind spread faster than the storm, and by morning, the hardware store buzzed like a hive. Ellen hugged him fierce, pies forgotten, while customers offered nods that bordered on respect. Jake lurked at the edges, his crew thinner, eyes darting like cornered animals. Theo caught him in the parking lot after shift, leaning against the patrol car with arms crossed. "Heard you slayed the dragons. Proud of you." Matthew smiled, genuine this time, the ache in his chest shifting to something lighter. "Dragons? More like vipers. But yeah. It's mine." Theo pushed off the car, closing the distance. "Then let's celebrate. Dinner at my place. Nothing fancy. Just us." The invitation hung, simple words laced with intent. Matthew nodded, pulse quickening. "ID like that." Theo's cabin sat on the outskirts, a log-built haven with a porch overlooking the river, fairy lights strung against the encroaching night. Inside, it smelled of wood smoke and garlic, a pot simmering on the stove. Theo poured wine, red and robust, and they ate at a scarred oak table, stories flowing easy as the pour. "You ever think about leaving?" Matthew asked, fork pausing over pasta. Theo shrugged, candlelight dancing in his eyes. "Used to. After Sarah. The ex thought the badge is too heavy. But this place, it pulls you back. Like roots." Sarah. The name landed soft, a reminder of boundaries. Matthew sipped his wine, the warmth spreading. "Roots. Yeah. Mine are tangled, but they hold." Conversation meandered to dreams, Theo's boyhood sketches of boats, Matthew's sketches of gardens that could feed a town. Laughter came unbidden, and when their hands brushed reaching for bread, neither pulled away. Later, on the porch, stars pricking the velvet sky, Theo turned to him. "Matthew. I don't know what this is. But it's real." The kiss was tentative, born of starlight and shared silences, Theo's lips warm and questioning. Matthew leaned in, heart full, the world expanding in that touch. For the first time, Willow Creek felt like home. But dawn brought the reckoning. A letter slipped under his door, anonymous scrawl, "Castle or not, you're still trash. Watch your back." The threat coiled cold, and as he drove to the castle for the first time, the road winding through mist-shrouded pines, Matthew gripped the wheel tight. Inheritance was power, but power drew shadows. The gates creaked open under his touch, wrought iron yielding like fate. Hawthorne Castle rose before him, turrets clawing at the clouds, ivy-cloaked walls whispering of eras past. He stepped out, boots crunching gravel, and breathed deep the scent of damp stone and wild rose. The gardens were a jungle, thorns guarding secrets, but in the greenhouse, glass-fogged and fragile, he found Elias' notebook, sketches of hybrids, notes on soil pH, a pressed flower marked for the tender heart. Tears came then, hot and unashamed, as he traced the uncle's words. "Grow, boy. Don't just survive." Inside, the halls echoed empty, dust motes dancing in sunbeams through cracked panes. The library held fortunes in volumes, the master suite a king's ransom in faded velvet. But it was the attic that undid him, trunks of letters, photos of Elias young and laughing with a man whose eyes mirrored Matthew's own, arms entwined in pre-Stonewall defiance. Elias had been gay, hidden in plain sight, his legacy a quiet rebellion. Matthew sank to the floor amid yellowed pages, the pieces slotting, the choice, the note, the castle as sanctuary. He spent the day exploring, reclaiming rooms with sweeps of broom and bursts of light, the work grounding him. By evening, as he locked the gates, the anonymous threat lingered, but so did Theo's kiss, a counterpoint of hope. Back in town, the fairgrounds lay littered with confetti ghosts, but life pulsed on. At the store, Ellen pressed a key into his palm. For the garden shed. "Your empire starts small." Gratitude swelled, and he hugged her, the embrace fierce. "Thanks, Ellen. For seeing me." That night, Theo called, voice rough with sleep. "Missed you already. Castle treating you right." Matthew lay on his couch, the apartment's confines tighter now. "It's alive. Like it was waiting." "Good. Come over tomorrow. We'll plan the grand reveal." Sleep claimed him with dreams of blooming thorns and hands intertwined, but morning shattered it all. A crash from the garden alley, glass breaking, and he bolted down, finding the dahlias trampled, petals bruised under boot prints that matched Jake's size 13. Rage boiled, pure and primal, as he surveyed the ruin. Calling Theo felt like surrender, but the deputy arrived, lights flashing, face thunderous. "This ends now," Theo growled, bagging evidence. "He'll haul him in." Matthew nodded, fists clenched. "Make it stick." The arrest hit Willow Creek like a thunderclap, Jake ranting in cuffs about freaks taking over, his crew scattering like roaches. The town's pulse quickened, whispers turning to debates at the diner, sides drawn, old wounds ripped open. Ellen closed the store early, pulling Matthew into the back for tea. "Has a bully, Matty. But bullies break." "I know." He stirred sugar absently. Just tired of breaking first. Theo stopped by after, uniform rumpled, bringing takeout from the Chinese place. They ate on the apartment floor, boxes open like confessions. "You're stronger than this town knows," Theo said, hand on Matthew's knee. The touch ignited, and they tumbled together, clothes shedding like old skins, bodies mapping uncharted territories. Theo was gentle, reverent, whispers of beautiful against sweat-slick skin. In the afterglow, tangled sheets and tangled hearts, Matthew traced the scar above Theo's eye. "Stay," Theo murmured. "Build with me." The words were a vow, and Matthew clung to them as sleep took hold. Weeks blurred into renovation frenzy, contractors swarming the castle under Matthew's vision, gardens reborn as edible paradises, library open to the public, greenhouses humming with community classes. Willow Creek watched, wary then warming, as truckloads of locals hauled in donations, curiosity blooming into collaboration. The Thorns appealed, but their case crumbled in court, Lydia's testimony unraveling under cross about forged documents. Marcus called Matthew after, voice oily. "You win this round, cousin." But blood remembers. The threat echoed the anonymous note, and Matthew installed cameras, the castle's shadows longer now. Romance with Theo deepened in stolen moments, picnics by the river, where they skipped stones and shared fears, nights in the master suite, fire crackling as they planned futures. Theo spoke of quitting the force, partnering in the gardens. Matthew dreamed of festivals, the castle a hub of healing. But cracks formed. Theo pulled away after shifts, eyes distant. Just cases piling up, heads say, but Matthew felt the drift, a chill wind through open windows. The crisis hit on a fog-bound morning, Matthew arriving at the store to find Ellen in tears, a letter crumpled in her fist. "They're closing us down, Matty. Harlan's buying the building, turning it into storage. Jake out on bail, his father's influence flexing. Retaliation, pure and petty." Matthew stormed to the station, bursting into Theo's office. "Tell me you didn't know." Theo looked up, guilt etching his face. "Matthew, it's complicated. Jake's dad. Hez on the council. Pressuring you." The words cut, betrayal blooming cold. "To what?" "Look the other way." Theo stood, hands raised. "No. To stay neutral." "But I can't. I love you, but this town." The but hung, a chasm. Matthew backed away, vision blurring. Love? Or convenience? He fled to the castle, the gate slamming like finality, and locked himself in the greenhouse, shards of glass and soil his only company. Hours passed in sobs, the uncle's notebook open to a passage. Betrayal is the thorn that prunes. Let it hurt, then grow beyond. Theo pounded the door at dusk, voice breaking. "Let me in. Please." Matthew opened it, eyes red-rimmed. Why him? Why now? Theo knelt in the dirt, uniform soiled. Fear. My dad's sick, bills stacking. Harlan's offering. I thought I could protect you by playing along. Stupid. I'm sorry. The confession cracked something in Matthew, rage yielding to raw ache. You chose them. No. Theo reached, tentative. I choose wrong. But I choose you now. If you'll have me. They talked through the night, words stripping layers, Theo's childhood shadowed by a rigid father, Matthew's scars from Ryan echoed in this fracture. Dawn found them entwined on the greenhouse floor, forgiveness fragile but forming. The healing began tentative, Theo resigning the force, joining the castle crew full-time. They cleared the vandalized garden together, planting anew, each seedling a step. Jake's trial loomed, but Matthew testified not with venom, but truth, pain inflicted, cycles broken. The judge sentenced community service at the castle gardens, Jake sullen but showing up, shears in hand. One afternoon, as Jake hacked at weeds under Matthew's watch, the man muttered, "Didn't think you'd give me a shot." Matthew shrugged, handing him gloves. Everyone deserves roots. Theo watched from the porch, pride in his eyes, and later, as they walked the restored paths, he dropped to one knee, a simple band glinting. "Marry me? Build this life." Tears fell, joy pure. Yes. 1,000 times. The wedding was Willow Creek's redemption, castle lawns blooming under June sun, guests from Portland to the foothills, Ellen officiating with tearful vows. Jake stood awkwardly in the back, a nod exchanged with Matthew across the aisle. In the years that followed, Hawthorne Castle became legend, a haven for outcasts, gardens feeding the hungry, library hosting story hours where identities bloomed free. Matthew and Theo adopted a son from the city, a boy with hazel eyes and a laugh like rivers, teaching him to tend soil and souls. On quiet evenings, Matthew would sit with Elias' notebook, tracing the uncle's words, and whisper thanks to the stars. Betrayal had pruned, mockery fertilized, love the sun that made them thrive. In Willow Creek, they no longer mocked the gardener. They marveled at the man who turned thorns to triumph. The castle's shadow stretched long across the gravel drive as Matthew pulled up, the truck's engine ticking down like a heartbeat slowing after a sprint. It was his third visit since the inheritance, each one peeling back another layer of the place's guarded mystery. The air here carried a different weight than Willow Creek's valley fog, sharper with salt from the distant Pacific and the faint, metallic tang of untended iron. He killed the ignition and sat for a moment, hands still on the wheel, staring at the facade that seemed to stare back, its gargoyles weathered but watchful. Inside, the foyer swallowed sound, a vast hall with a chandelier draped in cobwebs like forgotten lace. Matthew flicked on a light, the bulb humming to life and casting pools of yellow across Persian rugs frayed at the edges. He dropped his duffel by the grand staircase, the wood groaning under his boots as he climbed to the east wing, where Victor had said the family quarters waited. The bedroom was a time capsule, four-poster bed with canopy sagging from disuse, a wardrobe spilling moth-eaten suits, and on the nightstand, a silver frame holding a faded photo of Elias, young and stern, arm around a man whose face blurred in the dimness. Matthew set the frame down gently, as if it might shatter, and crossed to the window. Below, the gardens unfurled in chaotic splendor, overgrown paths leading to a pond choked with lily pads. It called to him, that wild heart, and he descended, grabbing gloves from his truck before wading in. Thorns snagged his jeans, roses rebelling against neglect, but he worked methodically, clipping and clearing, sweat beading despite the chill. Hours slipped by, the sun arcing toward noon, and when he surfaced, dirt-streaked and aching, a shape moved at the tree line. Theo. He emerged from the pines like he'd always belonged, flannel untucked over khakis, a thermos in hand. Figured you'd be out here. Coffee, black as your mood. Matthew accepted it, the steam warming his palms. How'd you find me? Theo grinned, that easy flash that disarmed. Small town. Plus, you mentioned the place once, years back. Thought you might need backup against the ghosts. They sat on a stone bench, half buried in ivy, sipping in companionable silence. Theo's presence was steady, like the river beyond, and Matthew found himself talking, words tumbling about the will, the thorns, the way the castle felt both anchor and albatross. It's not just bricks, he said, gesturing vaguely. It's him. Elias. Like he left me a puzzle to solve. Theo nodded, eyes on the pond. Puzzles are for solving together. If you'll let me. The offer hung light, no pressure, and Matthew felt the knot in his chest loosen a fraction. They spent the afternoon exploring, Theo's laughter echoing off the walls as they discovered a billiards room with cues warped from damp, a kitchen vast enough for a banquet. In the library, shelves towered to the ceiling, ladders on rails leading to volumes that smelled of leather and longing. Theo pulled down a botany text, flipping to illustrations of rare orchids, and Matthew leaned in, their shoulders brushing. You were made for this, Theo murmured, not looking up. The dirt, the legacy. It's in your blood. Matthew closed the book, fingers lingering on the spine. Blood that's half thorns, remember? They won't let it go easy. Theo's hand found his, brief but firm. Then we fight dirty. Or clean. Your call. Dinner was improvised from the truck's cooler, sandwiches on the terrace, stars pricking the sky as crickets chorused. Conversation meandered to safer ground, Theo recounting a botched stakeout involving a raccoon and a deputy's hat, Matthew sharing tales of Portland's underground flower markets. Laughter came easier here, away from prying eyes, and when Theo stood to leave, the goodbye stretched, a hug that pressed close. "Drive safe," Matthew said, voice rough. "You too." Theo paused at the truck, then turned back. "This place suits you. Don't let the shadows win." Alone again, Matthew wandered the halls, the castle's quiet amplifying his thoughts. He found the attic by accident, a pull like gravity leading him up creaking stairs to a door stuck fast with rust. Prying it open revealed chaos, trunks bursting with linens, crates of porcelain, and in the corner, a desk piled with journals. Elias's handwriting, meticulous and slanted, filled the pages, entries on timber yields, sketches of garden layouts, but interspersed, fragments of poetry, lines about stolen glances and midnight rivers. One passage stopped him cold. "The boy reminds me of us, young and unbowed. If I could gift him the strength we lost." The us was the man in the photo, and Matthew sat cross-legged amid the dust, reading by flashlight until eyes burned. Elias had loved fiercely, hidden it deeper, built this fortress as both shield and cage. The parallels ached, Matthew's own heart still raw from Ryan's ghost. Sleep evaded him downstairs, so he camped in the library, blankets spread on the rug before the dormant fireplace. Dreams came vivid, gardens aflame, Theo pulling him from the blaze, Elias nodding approval from the shadows. Morning brought rain, sheets of it drumming the roof like impatient fingers. Matthew rose stiff, brewed coffee on a hot plate Victor had stocked, and ventured out to the greenhouse. The structure was a cathedral of glass and rust, panes fogged with condensation, vines twisting through cracked frames. Inside, humidity wrapped him like her embrace, exotic plants clawing for light, ferns unfurling like secrets, orchids nodding in silent conspiracy. He spent the day there, pruning and potting, the work a meditation that soothed the edges of doubt. By afternoon, the rain eased to mist, and he heard the crunch of tires. Not Theo this time, but Ellen, her old sedan sputtering to a halt, arms laden with groceries and a toolbox. "Victor called," she said, bustling in without preamble. "Said you might need reinforcements. Brought pie too." Matthew laughed, the sound surprising him, and they set to work, Ellen wielding a wrench on loose panes while he replanted succulents. Talk flowed of store gossip, her grandkids' antics, the way Willow Creek was already buzzing with castle tales. "They're jealous, Matty," she said, wiping sweat from her brow. "But jealous turns to awe if you let it." He nodded, handing her a fern. "Trying. The thorns. They're circling." Ellen paused, eyes sharp. "Let 'em. You've got hawthorn in you." As dusk fell, they shared pie on the greenhouse steps, apples tart and cinnamon warm. Ellen left with promises of more visits, and Matthew watched her taillights fade, the castle feeling less empty. That evening, he called Theo, the phone pressed to his ear as he paced the library. "You were right. Ghosts aren't so scary in daylight." Theo's voice crackled with smile. "Told you. How's the greenhouse?" "Alive. Come see it sometime. Properly." A pause, then soft, "Count on it." The line went dead, but the warmth lingered, a seed planted deep. Back in Willow Creek midweek, the town thrummed with harvest prep, pumpkins mounded in fields like orange sentinels. At the store, business boomed with orders for fencing and bulbs, locals eyeing Matthew with new calculation. Jake kept his distance, but his glares from across the street burned. Theo met him after shift, patrol car waiting like a chariot. "Ride to the ridge? Clear your head." They drove the winding road to Eagles Point, where the valley spread below like a quilt stitched in greens and golds. Parking at the overlook, they hiked a trail damp from recent showers, pines towering overhead, the air crisp with resin. At the summit, a flat rock served as bench, and they sat, legs dangling over the drop. Theo unpacked a thermos of soup, steam rising like prayers. "Talked to my captain today. Asking for leave. Want to help with the castle full weekends? Matthew turned, surprise mingling with gratitude. You sure? Badge looks good on you. Theo shrugged, spoon clinking. Badge pays bills. You pay in ways that matter. The words bridged the space between, and Matthew leaned in, their kiss salt-tanged from the wind, deepening with the urgency of unspoken promises. Hands roamed, careful on the open ledge, but the world narrowed to breath and beat. Back at the truck, flushed and laughing, Theo started the engine. That's one way to claim the view. Matthew grinned, window down to the rushing air. Best one yet. But home brought the shadow, another note, this one taped to his apartment door, scrawled in fury. Thorns send regards. Sell or suffer. Heart pounding, he photographed it, texted Theo, then bolted the door. Sleep was fitful, dreams of crumbling walls and grasping hands. The Portland meeting with Victor was a fortress of facts, the Thorns appeal filed, citing moral unfitness in veiled terms that made Matthew's stomach turn. Victor assured him, we've got precedents. Elias's intent is clear. But doubt gnawed as he drove back, radio humming ballads of lost loves. At the garden, he found solace in the soil, replanting the trampled dahlias with tender fury. A shadow fell, and he looked up to see Jake, hands shoved in pockets, face unreadable. Harlan. Jake shifted, boots scuffing dirt. Heard about the notes. Wasn't me. But. Sorry for the garden. Heat of the moment. Matthew stood, wiping hands on jeans. Heat? Or hate? Jake's jaw worked. Both. Dad's on a tear about the store. Blames you. The inheritance? Or me? Jake met his eyes, something cracking. You. Always have. But maybe it's time to grow up. He walked away, leaving Matthew stunned, the apology a weed in barren ground. Theo arrived soon after, note in hand from forensics, no prints, but paper from the Thorns firm. They're desperate. We'll counter. That night, at Theo's cabin, they cooked together, chopping onions that brought tears, laughter chasing the sting. In bed, bodies aligned like puzzle pieces, Theo whispered against his neck, "You're my horizon, Matthew." Endless. The words anchored him through the storm brewing. Renovations ramped up, Matthew hiring a crew from Eugene, their hammers echoing like heartbeats. The gardens transformed first, paths mulched with cedar, beds bursting with natives, salal and sword ferns mingling with heirlooms. The greenhouse became his command center, classes advertised in the town paper, gardening for beginners, all welcome. Sign-ups trickled in, tentative faces at the first session, Ellen beaming, a cluster of kids wide-eyed, even Mrs. Harlan, Jake's mom, hovering at the edge. Theo joined as co-instructor, his uniform swapped for overalls, demonstrating compost turns with boyish enthusiasm. After, as students dispersed, they lingered, hands dirted, stealing kisses amid the pots. "You're glowing," Theo said, thumb brushing Matthew's cheek. "So are you." But the idyll fractured with a call from Victor, Thorns escalating, hiring investigators to dig into Matthew's past. Stay vigilant. Vigilance came hard when love blinded. One evening, returning from the castle, Matthew found his truck keyed, freak gouge deep. Theo's rage matched his, but the damage was done, a scar on steel mirroring the one inside. They drove to the station in silence, filing the report, Theo's hand tight on his. "This ends. I promise." At home, Matthew showered off the grime, water scalding, and emerged to Theo waiting with takeout and a playlist of old jazz. They ate on the couch, feet tangled, and when Theo pulled him close, it was slow, reverent, a reclaiming. "I'd burn it all for you," Theo breathed. "Don't," Matthew replied, fingers in dark hair. "Build instead." The building continued, the castle's library opening with a ribbon-cutting attended by half the town, books borrowed under chandeliers restored to sparkle. Speeches were short, Matthew's voice steady, "This isn't mine alone. It's ours." Applause thundered, Jake in the crowd, clapping awkward but real. Later, with Theo, champagne fizzing, they danced in the empty hall, waltz improvised to imagined strings. To horizons, Matthew toasted. To us. But horizons darkened with the next thorn salvo, a leaked photo from Matthew's Portland days, him and Ryan in an embrace, splashed across a tabloid with headlines screaming "Air's scandalous past." Willow Creek erupted, whispers venomous again. At the store, customers averted eyes, Ellen defended fierce, but the chill seeped. Theo found him in the garden at dawn, face buried in hands. "It's lies. You're not." Matthew looked up, hollow. "Feels true. The town's seeing the worst." Theo knelt, cupping his face. "Then show them the best. You're the man who turns ruins to roses." The words were lifeline, and Matthew clung, rebuilding brick by emotional brick. The counter-appeal was swift, Victor burying the thorns in privacy violations. But the damage lingered, trust frayed. One night, storm raging, Theo confessed over whiskey by the cabin fire. Saw the photo. Jealous, for a second. Stupid. Matthew set his glass down. Jealous? Of a ghost? Theo nodded, eyes shadowed. Made me realize. I want forever with you. Not just this. The vulnerability cracked them open, tears mingling with kisses, storm outside mirroring the one within. Healing wove slow, therapy sessions in Portland for both, unpacking baggage in a neutral space. Matthew learned to voice fears, Theo, to release control. The castle's grand opening approached, a festival planned, booths, music, garden tours. Invites went town-wide, even to the Thorns, a gauntlet thrown. Lydia arrived unannounced days before, heels sinking in gravel, Marcus trailing. Touching, this little fate. But Elias would roll over. He hated crowds. Matthew faced them on the terrace, Theo at his side. He hated hiding more. This is for him. Marcus sneered. For you, you mean? The Playboy heir. Theo's hand tightened on Matthew's. Leave. Or the cops get the full story on your forgeries. They left seething, but the seed of defeat was sown. The festival dawned golden, Willow Creek spilling onto the lawns in waves, families picnicking, kids chasing butterflies, Jake manning a grill with surprising skill. Ellen's pie sold out by noon, her laughter ringing. Matthew and Theo cut the ribbon together, hands linked, and as cheers rose, Matthew felt the shift, mockery to marvel. That night, under fireworks bursting like confessions, Theo pulled him aside. Ready for the next chapter. Matthew kissed him, deep and sure. With you? Always. But chapters twist, and the next brought crisis, a fire in the old stables, arson suspected, flames licking timbers as sirens wailed. Matthew watched from the drive, Theo's arm around him, lost clawing. Investigators pointed to Thorn hirelings, but proof slipped like ash. In the rubble, they found Elias's hidden cache, letters to his love, testaments of joy stolen by fear. Reading them by lantern light, Matthew wept for the uncle he'd never known, Theo holding him through the grief. Rebuilding started at dawn, community rallying, hammers swinging, donations pouring. Jake led a crew, sweat banded, redemption in every nail. Through it, love deepened, Theo proposing informally over blueprints, partners? In dirt and dreams. Yes, Matthew breathed, sealing it with salt and promise. The castle rose stronger, scars visible but beautiful, a testament to fire's forge. In Willow Creek, they spoke of the gardener not in jest, but in awe, the man who'd inherited more than stone, he'd claimed his heart's keep. Embers still glowed in the stable ruins as Matthew sifted through the debris the morning after the fire, the acrid smoke clinging to his clothes like a bad memory. The sky above Hawthorne Castle was a bruised purple, dawn struggling against the night's violence, and the air hummed with the low buzz of investigators combing the site. Theo stood nearby, coordinating with the fire chief, his face set in lines of exhaustion that mirrored Matthew's own. They had arrived just in time the night before, alerted by a neighbor's call, the blaze roaring like a beast unleashed. No one hurt, thank God, but the loss carved deep, a wing of history reduced to char. You find anything? Theo asked, voice rough from shouting orders. Matthew held up a scorched journal, Elias's script barely legible on the cover. This. Tucked in a beam. Like he knew. Theo took it gently, flipping pages singed at the edges. Dates from the 70s. Personal stuff. They retreated to the greenhouse, the glass walls a fragile sanctuary, and spread the journal on a potting bench. Elias's words spilled out in ink-faded but fierce accounts of secret meetings with his lover, Daniel, in the stables under cover of moon, rant against a world that demanded closets, dreams of a garden where love grew unchecked. One entry gutted Matthew, if I had a son, I'd teach him to burn the hiding places first. Let the world see the bloom. Tears pricked, hot and unbidden, and Matthew swiped them away. He built this for escape. Now it's under siege. Theo closed the journal, hand resting on Matthew's. Then we fortify. Together. The investigators confirmed arson that afternoon, accelerant traces, a discarded glove with thorn-firm fibers. Victor was looped in, his voice crackling over speakerphone from Portland. This is criminal. I'll bury them in lawsuits. But lawsuits were cold comfort as Matthew surveyed the damage, the crew idled, funds stretched thin for rebuilds. Willow Creek rallied in whispers at first, then action, the diner sending meals, the library book club donating rare volumes for a fundraiser auction. Even Jake appeared at the gates, truck bed loaded with lumber, his dad notably absent. Figured you could use this, Jake muttered, avoiding eyes. From the mill. No charge. Matthew nodded, throat tight. Appreciate it. Grab a hammer. Jake hesitated, then did, swinging beside locals in a rhythm that built more than wood. By evening, beams framed the skeleton anew, progress in every strike. Theo pulled Matthew aside as dusk fell, the crew's fire pit crackling with shared stories. He's trying. The whole town's shifting. Yeah, Matthew agreed, leaning into him. But the thorns. They're not done. Sleep that night was fractured, nightmares of flames licking at Theo's heels, Elias calling from the smoke. Matthew woke gasping, Theo's arms pulling him close in the master bed, the room still half unpacked with sheets draped like ghosts. It's over, Theo murmured, lips against his temple. I'm here. But over was illusion. The next threat came subtle, anonymous calls to contractors, whispers of unstable air poisoning bids. Work stalled, frustration mounting, and Matthew snapped at a meeting, voice echoing in the library, if they want war, give it to them. Theo calmed him after, walked through the restored gardens, dew slick underfoot. War's their game. We play growth. The growth came in green shoots, the first community class overflowed the greenhouse, townsfolk of all ages learning to propagate lavender, hands in soil forging bonds. Mrs. Harlan attended, her presence a quiet olive branch, chatting with Matthew about heirloom roses over tea. You're good at this, she said, eyes soft. Jake. He's watching. Learning. Matthew smiled faintly. Takes time. Like everything. Romance threaded through the tension, Theo and he stealing mornings in the pond, swimming naked in the chill water, laughter echoing off willows. One afternoon, drying on the bank, Theo traced Matthew's tattoos, vines curling up his forearm from Portland days. Stories here, Theo said, fingers light. Some good, some thorns. Matthew turned, pulling him down. You make the good grow. Their lovemaking was urgent, grass-stained and sun-warmed, a defiance against shadows. But shadows lengthened with the thorns' next move, a press conference in Portland, Lydia tearfully claiming family rights stolen by an outsider, photos of Elias with the cousin's doctor to warmth. The local paper ran it front page, castle controversy, is the heir unfit? Willow Creek's fragile alliance wavered, old bigots emboldened, graffiti sprouting on the castle's outer wall, go back to the city, queer. Matthew found it at dawn, paint dripping like blood, and rage trembled through him. He called Theo, voice breaking, and by the time the deputy arrived, the crew was scrubbing, Ellen passing brushes with grim determination. "This is bullshit," Theo growled, paint flecking his shirt. "I'll trace the cans." But Matthew waved him off, joining the line, elbow to elbow with Jake, who muttered, "My old man stirring it." "Sorry." The apology landed heavier than the insult, and Matthew paused, roller dripping. "Fix it, then." From inside. Jake nodded, resolve hardening. The crisis peaked at the fundraiser gala, castle aglow with lanterns, guests in semi-formal mingling under chandeliers. Bid soared on donated art, wine flowing, but midway, Marcus Thorne crashed the gate, drunk and bellowing, Lydia trailing with a reporter in tow. "You fraud!" Marcus slurred, shoving through security. "This belongs to real family." Chaos erupted, glasses shattering, guests scattering. Theo tackled him smooth, cuffs clicking, while Matthew faced Lydia, voice steel. "Real family's the ones who show up. Like now." The reporter captured it all, but the spin flipped. Headlines next day hailed Matthew's grace, the Thorns' villainy exposed. Arrests followed, forgery charges sticking, the cousins slinking back to their shadows. In the aftermath, the castle breathed easier, rebuild complete with a community hall rising phoenix-like. Matthew and Theo dedicated it to Elias and Daniel, a plaque reading for loves that endure. Healing deepened in quiet ways, therapy evolving to couples sessions, vulnerabilities shared over castle dinners. Theo opened about his father's disapproval, the badger shield against it. Matthew unpacked Ryan's abandonment, the castle a reclaiming. One evening, stars thick overhead, they sat on the terrace, sonogram photo in hand. No, wait, that was future whisper. For now, plans, adopting, expanding classes to youth groups, safe spaces blooming. "I want kids with you," Matthew said sudden, wine glass pausing. Theo's eyes lit. "Yeah?" "Little gardeners. Adventurers." The kiss sealed it, future tangible. Willow Creek transformed too, Jake confronting his dad at a council meeting, voting down a spiteful zoning block. The hardware store thrived under new ownership, Ellen partnering with Matthew for supply runs. A year on, the anniversary of the fire marked with a bonfire, not destruction, but stories shared, marshmallows toasting as flames danced harmless. Matthew spoke last, Theo's hand in his. "Fire takes, but it gives too." Cleared the deadwood. Cheers rose, and in the embers, he saw Elias smiling. Love, he knew now, was the ultimate inheritance, not stone, but the will to grow through any soil. The community hall's dedication ribbon fluttered in the breeze like a flag of surrender. The crowd gathered on the castle's front lawn, a tapestry of faces Matthew once thought closed to him. It was a crisp October afternoon, leaves turning the grounds to fire, and the air hummed with anticipation laced with the scent of mulled cider from Ellen's booth. Theo stood beside him, suit jacket slung over one shoulder, his tie loosened in that way that made Matthew's pulse skip. They had rehearsed the speeches a dozen times in the library, laughing over flubbed lines until the words felt like vows. Victor Lang, ever the polished anchor, emceed from the makeshift podium, his voice booming through speakers jury-rigged by the high school AV club. "Today, we honor not just Elias Hawthorne, but the legacy his passed to hands that nurture rather than hoard." Applause swelled as the plaque was unveiled, brass gleaming, Elias Hawthorne and Daniel Reese, builders of hidden gardens, lovers eternal. May their roots inspire us all. Matthew's chest tightened at the names, the journal's secrets now public, shared in a town meeting where gasps turned to nods of understanding. He stepped forward when cued, notes crumpled in his pocket, but the words came unscripted. "Elias didn't leave me a castle. He left a charge, to grow what others neglect. This hall, it's for classes, gatherings, stories told without fear. Because love, in all its forms, is the strongest foundation." The crowd leaned in, Jake near the front with his mom, arms crossed but eyes attentive. Ellen dabbed her eyes from the side, and somewhere in the back, a cluster of Portland friends who'd driven up nodded approval. Theo's hand brushed his lower back as he stepped down, a silent well done that warmed deeper than the sun. The afternoon unfolded in joyful chaos, booths hawking jams and quilts, a bluegrass band fiddling on the terrace, children racing through the hedge maze Matthew had restored with labyrinthine paths symbolizing journeys out. Theo manned the cider press, sleeves rolled, charming donations with tales of the fire's aftermath, while Matthew drifted, greeting neighbors who'd once averted eyes. Mrs. Harlan cornered him by the rose arbor, her floral dress a bold contrast to her usual muted tones. "Beautiful work, Matthew." "Jake's. He's changed." "You're doing." He smiled, clipping a spent bloom. "Ours. Takes a village." She squeezed his arm, fleeting but firm, and moved on, leaving him with a swell of something like belonging. As dusk crept in, lanterns ignited along the paths, casting golden pools that danced with fireflies. The band slowed to ballads, couples swaying on the lawn, and Theo found Matthew by the pond, skipping stones with a gaggle of kids. "Stealing my thunder," Theo teased, joining the toss, his skip beating Matthew's by 2. "Kids like the underdog story." Matthew grinned, waving the children off to the hay ride. Alone now, the water lapping soft, Theo pulled him close, foreheads touching. "You were brilliant up there." "Proud." Heat rose, not from cider, and Matthew kissed him slow, the world fading to ripple and rustle. "Couldn't without you." They broke apart at a cough, Victor, clipboard in hand, tallying auction totals. "A windfall, gentlemen. Enough to fund youth programs for years." Toasts followed in the hall, vaulted ceilings echoing cheers, the space alive with laughter where silence once reigned. Jake approached then, beer in hand, posture stiff but sincere. "Hail. Good speech. Meant it about the village." Dad stepping back from counsel. "Time for new." Matthew extended a hand, grip solid. "Welcome to it." Jake shook, lingering. "Those classes. Mind if I help? Got a green thumb buried somewhere." "Plenty of room." As Jake melted into the crowd, Theo whispered, "Miracles happen." The night wound down with stragglers around the fire pit, stories swapping like embers. Matthew and Theo slipped away to the greenhouse, the glass steamed from earlier classes, now a private haven of moonlight on leaves. They spread a blanket amid the pots, wine bottle passed between, and talked futures. The adoption agency paperwork started, home studies looming. "Imagine," Theo said, tracing Matthew's palm. "A kid running these halls, learning from Elias's ghosts." Matthew nodded, head on Theo's chest. "Teaching them thorns don't define the rose." Lovemaking followed, gentle and grounding, bodies attuned like garden beds to seasons. Afterward, tangled and sated, Theo murmured, "Marry me." "For real? This weekend, here." Matthew lifted, eyes searching. "Rush?" Theo smiled, ring box materializing from nowhere, a simple gold band etched with vines. "We've waited lifetimes." "Say yes." Yes, breath and vow, sealing with tears and touch. The wedding planning blitz ensued, Willow Creek pitching in, Ellen on cake, the band for music, Jake even offering to officiate after getting ordained online, a joke that stuck when Matthew called his bluff. Why not? Redemption arc needs a bow. Portland friends arrived en masse, adding city polish to country charm, a queer choir for the ceremony, drag queens emceeing the reception. The Thorn sent a cease and desist that Victor shredded on video, posting to the town forum for laughs. Ceremony day dawned misty, the lawn transformed with arches of wildflowers, seats hay-baled and ribboned. Matthew waited in the library, suit tailored simple, linen shirt, vest with pocket watch from Elias's trunk, nerves humming like bees. Theo paced the hall, handsome in navy, boutanier of lavender pin proud. Ellen escorted Matthew down the aisle, arm looped, her whisper fierce, "He's the one, Matty." All of him. The choir swelled with at last, and there was Theo, eyes locked, the world narrowing to that gaze. Jake stood grave at the arch, words stumbling but true, "You too. You've shown us growth ain't easy, but damn if it ain't worth it." Vows? They exchanged rings, promises poured like rain, Theo's voice cracking on through fires and floods, Matthew steady within soil and starlight. Kiss sealed it, cheers erupting, confetti of petals raining. Reception spilled into feast, long tables groaning under roasts and salads from the gardens, toasts ranging heartfelt to hilarious, the drag queen's roast of small-town scandals drawing howls. Dances followed, Matthew and Theo first, slow circle under lanterns, then opening the floor to chaos, kids twirling, elders two-stepping, Jake even pulling his mom for a spin. As midnight neared, guests departed in waves, the castle quieting to echoes. Matthew and Theo retreated to the master suite, door locked on the world, honeymoon deferred to a cabin getaway next week. They made love with the abandon of newlyweds, laughter mingling with moans, the better kingdom claimed. Morning brought coffee on the terrace, rings glinting in sun, and the first call to adoption agency, home visit scheduled. Ready? Theo asked, hand over Matthew's. More than. Life accelerated then, the visitor whirlwind of staged normalcy, gardens tidied, hall prepped for play. The social worker, a kind-eyed woman named Rita, toured with nods, asking gentle probes, how do you handle conflict? Theo spoke of therapy, Matthew of the fire's lessons. What legacy for a child? Love without walls, they chorused. Approval came weeks later, a boy named Luca, 6, with curls like Theo's and eyes haunted by foster shuttles. First meeting in a park, Luca shy with a truck clutched tight, but warming to Matthew's garden stories, Theo's silly faces. Bringing him home was magic, Luca's or at the castle, it's a fort. His room painted blue with star decals, bed piled with books. Nights were rote, baths, stories of Elias the explorer, tucking in with safe here. Challenges wove in, Luca's nightmares, screams piercing dark, Matthew rocking him while Theo brewed tea. School start brought bullies, echoes of Matthew's past, but they faced it united, meetings with teachers, playdates at the gardens where kids learned empathy in dirt. One spring, Luca came home bruised, whispering fags kid from a classmate. Rage flared, but Theo breathed, teach, don't punish. They did a workshop at school, Matthew sharing his story, Theo on strength in difference. The boy who taunted attended, head down, and later drew Luca an apology card with flowers. Growth rippled, Jake, now a regular volunteer, mentored teens in the hall, his own coming out tentative at a support group, embraced with beers and backslaps. Willow Creek's pride flag flew year-round at town hall, council vote unanimous. Matthew's novel came next, Roots of Rebellion, Elias's journals woven with his own, published to quiet acclaim. Book tour skipped for family, but signings in Portland drew crowds, Luca beaming in photos. Anniversary 5 years on, they renewed vows in the hall, Luca ring bearer, guests swelled with new friends. Jake toasted, voice thick, to thorns that teach. After, in bed, Luca asleep down the hall, Theo traced Matthew's laugh lines. Best plot twist. Matthew kissed him deep. The heart of it. The castle stood sentinel, gardens eternal, a testament, from mockery to marvel, love the vine that bound them all. Luca's small hand slipped into Matthew's as they navigated the county fair's midway, the air thick with the sizzle of corn dogs and the tinny calliope of the carousel. It was late summer, the sun dipping low to gild the Ferris wheel spokes, and Willow Creek's annual bash had grown since the castle's revival, now drawing folks from Eugene and beyond. Luca, 8 now and leggy with curiosity, tugged toward the ring toss, his curls bouncing. Dad Matty, bet I can win the bear. Matthew chuckled, fishing tickets from his pocket. All in, kiddo. Show 'em hail luck. Theo trailed with ice cream cones dripping in the heat, his free hand swinging a prize goldfish in a bag won earlier at the duck pond. Don't bankrupt us before the pie contest. The fair was a microcosm of their life now, chaotic joy laced with hard-won peace. 3 years since the adoption, Luca had woven into their tapestry seamless, his foster scars fading under layers of love and routine. Morning started with pancakes in the kitchen, Theo flipping with flair while Matthew packed lunches of garden fresh wraps. Afternoon split, Theo managing the castle's maintenance crew, Matthew leading classes that had expanded to online modules, reaching queer youth in rural pockets nationwide. But peace, Matthew knew, was soil that needed tending. The Thorns appeals had dragged 2 years, draining funds and faith, until a federal judge slammed the door with sanctions for frivolous claims. Lydia's final email, forwarded by Victor, was a venomous screed: "You've poisoned the bloodline." Matthew deleted it unread, but the echo lingered, a reminder that some weeds reseeded deep. Luca whooped as rings clanged true, the booth guy handing over a plush bear twice his size. "Told YA." Luca crowed, hugging it fierce. Theo ruffled his hair. "Champion." Now, pie judgment calls. Ellen's booth was a fortress of flaky crusts, ribbons already pinning her entries. She spotted them, waving a spatula. "Judges incoming." "Luca, taste test." The boy scampered over, bear in tow, and Matthew watched, heartful, as Ellen snuck him a sliver of berry. Nearby, Jake manned the grill for the volunteer fire department, apron-stained, flipping burgers with a grin for a cluster of teens orbiting him. His partner, a quiet carpenter named Riley from Salem, manned the soda cooler, their hands brushing casual in the open. "Look at that," Theo murmured, nodding Jake's way. "Full circle." Matthew nodded, pride mingling with the old ache. Jake's coming out had been a town earthquake, his father's disownment a rift that healed slow. But the castle support group, nights in the hall with coffee and couches, had been balm. Jake now co-led it, his story a bridge for others. The judging wrapped with Ellen's blue ribbon, cheers, and hugs ensuing. As they wandered to the livestock barns, Luca darting to pet lambs, Theo pulled Matthew behind a hay bale, stealing a kiss sticky with cone remnants. 5 years, Theo whispered. "Still my favorite adventure." Matthew grinned against his lips. And the plot thickens. Home that night, Luca crashed early, bear tucked under arm, and they retreated to the terrace, wine breathing on the table, stars unfurling overhead. The castle loomed benevolent, its turret silhouetted, a far cry from the ruin Matthew first claimed. "Book 2?" Theo asked, pouring. Matthew sipped, the mellow robust. "Outlines brewing." Luca's stories this time. The kid's got chapters in him. Theo's eye softened. "Our chapters." Conversation drifted to dreams, expanding the youth program to summer camps, Theo eyeing a horticulture cert online. But undercurrent tugged, the adoption follow-up next month, routine but stirring old fears of not enough. "You think Rita still sees us as green?" Matthew voiced it quiet. Theo set his glass down, hand finding Matthew's across the table. "She sees what Luca sees, home." The reassurance landed, but sleep brought dreams of empty cribs, waking Matthew sweat damp. Theo stirred, pulling him close. "Here." "Always." Morning brought routine, school drop-off, Luca waving from the bus with bear in backpack. At the greenhouse, class waited, teens from neighboring towns, virtual links flickering on screens. Today's lesson, grafting, joining disparate stems to stronger whole. "See?" Matthew demonstrated, knife precise. "Two become one, resilient." A girl in Idaho, face pixelated, asked, "Like coming out?" "Grafting your truth." The room nodded, and Matthew shared, voice steady, "Exactly." Scars show the join, but the bloom's worth it. After, a private message pinged, from a boy in Montana, "Your story saved me. Starting a garden club here." Matthew replied, heart swelling, forwarding to Theo with impact. Lunch was picnic-style in the Rose Arbor, Theo joining with sandwiches, their talk turning to the upcoming Pride picnic, Willow Creek's first, castle-hosted. "Jake's on security," Theo said. "Riley's baking." Matthew laughed. From grill master to ally extraordinaire. But the picnic prep unearthed a thorn, vandalism at the fairgrounds overnight, Pride banners slashed, "No fags in our town" scrawled in red. Sheriff, Theo's old captain, called it in, face grim at the station. "Remnants of Harlan SRS crowd," the sheriff said. "He's underground since Jake cut ties." Theo's jaw tightened. Luca goes to that school. This hits home. Matthew, looped in by text, arrived fists clenched. We push forward. Double the banners. The decision unified, picnic went on, bigger, with extra patrols. Community-stitched response, Ellen sewing replacements, Jake painting signs. The day dawned rainbow-drenched, lawns packed with families, drag story hour under the oaks drawing giggles, food trucks lining the drive. Luca, in a tea with Love Grows Here, handed flags to kids, his confidence a shield. Matthew emceed, voice booming, pride isn't parade here. It's every day, in the dirt we share. Theo watched from stage side, eyes proud, and when a heckler shouted from the tree line, Harlan Sr., face twisted, they met him calm. Jake stepped forward, voice low, Dad. Go home. This is family now. The man faltered, slinking away, and the crowd cheered louder, turning venom to volume. That night, bonfire lit, stories circled, Luca's turn, my dad's fixed everything, even the mean. Applause, and Matthew hugged him tight, Theo's arm around both. Crisis averted, but ripples reached the adoption review. Rita arrived midweek, touring the vibrant chaos, Luca's art on walls, garden plots with neighbor kids. Over tea, she probed, any recent stresses? Theo spoke of the vandalism, Matthew of the picnic's triumph. Rita smiled. Resilience. That's family. Final report glowed, model home. Proceed with sibling inquiry? Luca's joy at a baby sister prospect lit the castle, names banded over dinner, Willow, for the town that bent but didn't break. But joy tempered with test, Matthew's book launch coincided, Portland readings clashing with home studies. He agonized, but Theo waved it off. Go. We'll hold the fort. The city pulled, old friends toasting roots too, family soil, crowds lining for signs. Ryan appeared at one, older, solo, apology tentative, you built something real. Deserve it. Matthew nodded, closure crisp. I did. Back home, Luca greeted with drawings of baby Rose, Theo with a kiss that said missed you. The pregnancy journey surrogate found in Seattle, a cousin of a Portland friend, brought ultrasounds and nursery paints. Luca picked blues and greens, like the garden. Complications arose late, bedrest, worry gnawing. Matthew cancelled classes, Theo juggling work, Ellen moving in to cook and cuddle Luca. Through nights of vigil, Elias's journal open on the nightstand, love demands presence. Be the root. Rose arrived spring rained, tiny and fierce, cries echoing halls. Luca held her first, whisper of sister, and the castle felt complete. Baptism, no, naming ceremony in the hall, guests toasting with cider, Jake godfather with Riley, vows of grow together. Years folded, Rose toddling paths, Luca teen tall mentoring camps. Willow Creek's pride a staple, Harlan Sr. softened by grandkids, attending one with gruff nods. Matthew's third book, Thorns to Thrones, wove it all, bestseller quiet, impact loud. 10th anniversary, Castle Gala, Luca Deejing, Rose Flower Girl Redux. Theo pulled Matthew to the pond, ring renewed. Still yes. Always. In the reflection, they saw not just faces, but the garden they'd grown, from mock to majestic, love the eternal bloom. Rose's laughter pealed like bells through the castle's hedge maze, her chubby legs pumping as she darted around corners, a crown of daisies askew on her dark curls. At 3, she was a whirlwind of Theo's mischief and Matthew's quiet intensity, her hazel eyes, Luca's gift, sparkling with discovery. Luca, 15 and lanky, played pursuer, feigned growls sending her into squeals, while Matthew and Theo watched from the sundial clearing, picnic basket unpacked on the grass. Think she'll find the center before he cheats? Theo asked, popping a grape into Matthew's mouth. Matthew chewed, grinning. With Luca's shortcuts? No contest. The maze, restored with yew hedges clipped sharp, was a family rite, annual hunts for hidden treasures, chocolates for Rose, journals for Luca. Today marked the start of summer camp, Luca head counselor for the youth program, his charges arriving tomorrow, kids from farms and cities, all seeking soil and self. Theo leaned back on the blanket, shirt untucked, the lines around his eyes from laughter more than years. Proud of him. Echoes you, that fire. Matthew nodded, hand tracing Theo's knee. Us. The village. 7 years since Rose's birth, the castle pulsed with life, mornings of chaos, breakfasts juggled amid spills, afternoons of classes, greenhouses humming, evenings of stories. Elias's journal passed like heirloom. The surrogate, Mia, had become auntie, visits laced with wine and what ifs. But beneath the bloom, roots delved deep into past. The Thorns' final defeat had been Pyrrhic, assets seized for legal fees, Lydia fleeing to Europe, Marcus jailed, Bree for the arson link. Whispers said they sold the family plot in Portland, ghosts exorcised. Yet Matthew dreamed of them still, faces twisted in the flames. Luca burst from the maze then, Rose hoisted triumphant on his shoulders, a foil-wrapped chocolate clutched. We won. Center's ours. They collapsed in a heap, tickles and giggles, Matthew snapping a photo, for faces flushed, the castle turret framing like benediction. Camp opening was spectacle, buses rumbling up the drive, kids spilling out with duffels and doubts. Luca greeted them badge-pinned, voice steady, welcome to Hawthorne Haven. Here, we grow wild. Matthew's keynote in the hall drew tears, tales of his arrival, the mockery, the fire that forged. You're not broken stems. You're saplings. Bend, but don't break. Theo managed logistics, his maintenance team, Jake foreman now, ensuring bunks aired, paths clear. Evenings, families gathered for bonfires, story swapping, a trans girl from Boise sharing sketches, a boy from Idaho mirroring Matthew's early fears. One night, a camper confided to Luca, "They call me names at home." Luca, drawing from his own school skirmishes, replied, "Then plant louder. Show em your colors." Word spread, and Matthew overheard, chest swelling. Later, tucking Luca in the den, his teen cave of posters and plants, he said, "You're the legacy, kid." Luca shrugged, but eyes shone. "Just paying forward, Dad." Rose interrupted with nightmares midsummer, shadows under the bed, whispers of bad men. Mia visited then, her calmer balm, reading The Giving Tree until sleep took. Theo and Matthew tag-teamed vigils, fears surfacing in their own whispers. Are we enough? Therapy resumed, virtual now, unpacking the weight of witness. "You're modeling mend," the counselor said. "That's the heel." Fall brought Harvest Festival, bigger than fairs past, pumpkin patches carved by campers, cider presses cranking, a queer folk band strumming under oaks. Jake and Riley announced adoption plans, their toddler in arms, toasts ringing. But midfest, a ghost appeared, Harlan Sr., aged and stooped, at the gate with a pie tin. For the kid, he grunted, nodding Rose's way. Jake tensed beside, but Matthew waved him on. "Appreciate it." "Join?" The man shook head, but lingered, watching dances. Later, he cornered Theo by the grill. "Heard you quit the badge for this." "Soft." Theo flipped a burger, calm. "Stronger." "Family's my beat now." Harlan grunted, leaving, but returned next year, pie upgraded to cobbler. Winter tested, a blizzard buried the valley, power lines down, castle generator humming as shelter. Neighbors piled in, Bellen's brood, Jake's crew, turning halls to dorms, stories by candlelight. Rose crowned Snow Queen, Luca led sing-alongs, and in the chaos, Matthew found Theo in the library, books fortressed around. "Remember our first storm?" Theo asked, pulling him to the rug. Matthew laughed soft. "You, me, greenhouse fog." They made love quiet, world white outside, reaffirming in whispers. Spring thawed revelations, Luca's first crush, a camp boy named Finn, awkward confession over pancakes. "Is it okay? Like you and Dad, Theo?" Matthew hugged him fierce. "More than. Bring him for dinner." The meal was stilted joy, Finn shy, Rose quizzing on superheroes, Theo's lasagna easing nerves. After, Luca texted later, "Thanks. Feels normal." Normal evolved, Rose starting preschool, her art class smocks paint splashed, Matthew's fourth book, Saplings Rise, teen-focused, grants funding camp expansions. Crisis crested unexpected, a camper overdose scare, pill smuggled in grief's wake. Matthew held the boy through shakes, Theo coordinating medevac, the night a blur of sirens and sobs. Aftermath, policy overhauls, wellness checks mandatory. The boy, Alex, returned summers, crediting, "You saw me." Roots held. The heel was collective, town forum on mental health, Jake advocating from scars. Anniversary 15 loomed, but first, a trip, Portland for Matthew's reading, family en tow. Ryan attended again, now with husband, bridge-built casual. Luca's spitting image, he said. Back home, the castle waited, ever guardian. Rose's 5th birthday ballooned, garden party, pinata bursting candies, Luca DJing tween hits. As cake smeared faces, Theo pulled Matthew aside. Another? Matthew blinked. Kid? Theo nodded, ultrasound photo peeking. Surprise. Mia again. Joy exploded, Luca whooping, Rose claiming brother. The pregnancy shadowed easy, but birth brought storm, early labor, drive to Eugene frantic. Theo white-knuckled wheel, Matthew coaching breaths, Luca minding Rose at Ellen's. Jasper arrived howling, red-faced, fitting the boy's name, gem of the garden. Homecoming parade of sorts, castle banners, neighbors cheering. Nights blurred to feeds and folds, but love multiplied, Jasper's coos harmonizing with Rose's chatter. 2 years on, quintet complete, family hikes, Luca driving teen erratic, Finn shotgun. Jake's family picnics, Harlan Sr. doting grandpa awkward. Matthew's legacy speech at camp closing, from mocked gardener to this, it's you. The bloom. Thunderous applause, Theo's kiss stage side. In quiet, bed shared, kids asleep, Theo whispered, our story's epic. Matthew smiled into dark. And unending. The castle, once echo, now hummed eternal, proof that from derision's dirt, empires of heart could rise. Jasper's tiny fist curled around Matthew's finger as they rocked on the porch glider, the late afternoon sun slanting through the pines to dapple the boards in gold. At 2, the boy was a quiet storm, Theo's dark hair tufted wild, Matthew's hazel gaze thoughtful even in repose. The castle sprawled behind them, its windows aglow with evening prep, Luca, 17 and college-bound soon, setting tables for the solstice dinner, Rose, 7, bossing the menu with bossy precision, and Theo in the kitchen, apron tied, humming off-key to the radio. Willow Creek had mellowed into full embrace over the decade, its rough edges sanded by time and tending. The hardware store, under Ellen's retirement helm with Jake's help, supplied the castle's endless needs, Pride Month now a month-long festival, the town square rainbow washed. Harlan Sr. shuffled grandkids on his knee at gatherings, his grunt softened to stories of old mills, redemption a slow thaw. But Matthew never forgot the thorns. His latest book, Echoes in the Earth, delved deeper, Elias's full journals published, Daniel's letters unearthed in an attic trunk, a queer history reclaimed. Launch had been virtual, fans from Montana to Maine tuning in, Luca moderating with poise that swelled Matthew's pride. Daddy Matty, Jasper lisped, pointing skyward. Birdie dance. Matthew lifted him, spinning slow, the boy's giggles cascading like water over stones. Like this, little root. From the drive, Theo emerged, sleeves rolled, flour dusting his cheek. Dinner's chaos. Rose insists on kale smoothies for toasts. Matthew laughed, settling Jasper down to toddle inside. Rebel. Takes after you. Theo caught him at the door, kiss flower sweet. Takes after us. The hall brimmed that night, extended kin, Mia and her partner, Ellen's grandkids, Jake and Riley with their 2, even a card from Portland friends. Toast circled, Lucas, voice cracking on to the dads who dug deep, Rose's poem, dog-eared and earnest, Jake's, beer raised, to soil that sticks. Later, as plates cleared and littles crashed, the adults lingered by the fire pit, stars pricking vast. Harlan Sr. sat peripheral, pipe unlit, eyes on Jasper chasing fireflies. "Never thought I'd see this," he rumbled to Matthew, voice gravel. "You. Changing everything." Matthew poked the fire, sparks rising. "Not me. Time. And choice." The old man nodded, slow. "Made mine late. But here." It was absolution, unasked, and Matthew clasped his shoulder. "Welcome." Theo joined then, arms around Matthew's waist from behind. "Walk." They slipped away, path to the pond lit by lanterns, the water mirror still. Jasper babbled ahead, Luca herding Rose, the night soft with crickets. At the bench, they sat, family clustering, and Theo pulled an envelope from his pocket. For the epic. Inside, deeds, land adjacent expanded, a new camp wing planned. Our next chapter. Gasps, hugs, Luca's fist pumping. Epic indeed. But chapters turn on tides. Months later, college drop-off for Luca loomed, Finn tagging along for moral support. The drive to Corvallis was banter-laced, dorm unpacked with tears veiled as dust. "Call every day," Rose demanded, hugging fierce. Luca knelt, eyes level. "Promise." "But this," he gestured the castle in rear view, "it's in me now." Back home, the quiet empty room, echoes of laughter. Matthew found solace in the greenhouse, grafting hybrids named for kids, Luca's lavender, Rose's rose, Jasper's jasmine. Theo noticed, pulling him to therapy's couch. Nest half empty. Normal hurt. They grieved together, walks turning confessional, fears of fading relevance, joys in the small. Jasper's first words, grow a balm, Rose's school play, her as queen, a crown of thorns turned triumph. Crisis crested subtle, Matthew's health scare, a garden chemical exposure flaring allergies to crisis. Hospital nights, Theo vigilant, kids rotating visits, Luca driving down, Finn in tow, Rose drawing get wells. Recovery was garden slow, bed rest in the master, Elias's journal bedside mantra. Tend thyself first. Community enveloped, Dellen soups, Jake's repairs to the sickroom view. Out the other side, Matthew emerged tempered, classes virtual till strength returned. Luca's winter break brought news, engagement to Finn, ring simple as their start. Family dinner sealed it, Jasper toasting with juice, to more roots. Spring wedding in the maze, arches blooming, guests a quilt of past and present. Vows echoed Matthew's and Theo's, through thorns and time. Grandkids followed, Luca's twins, rambunctious, Rose's artist daughter, paint-fingered, Jasper's quiet boy, soil under nails. The castle aged graceful, turrets repointed, gardens a living archive. Matthew's final book, Legacy Loam, memoir complete, closed the circle, from Shovel's thud to this. Harlan SRS passing came gentle, funeral at the hall, Jake's eulogy raw, he learned late, but loved hard. Inheritance? A mill plot, deeded to the camp. Twilight years, Matthew and Theo rocked on the glider, Jasper's son, named Elias, napping between. Grandkids swarmed the lawn, echoes of old joys. You shocked them all, Theo said, hand weathered in Matthew's. Matthew smiled, eyes on the horizon. We did. From mockery to this miracle. The sun dipped, painting the castle rose, a final bloom in the endless garden of their lives. Love, proven, was the truest castle, unbreachable, ever growing.